Yeah, I know. Here we go. Another 2022 summary video. But I closed out 16 book series in 2022 and I wanted to do a little summary. So let's do a tier list. Alright, you guys probably know how these tier lists work. I renamed mine just like I did on my last set of tier lists that I've done. So the old S tier I called Best of the Best. A tier is Truly Outstanding. B tier is Good to Great. C tier is Mid. And the D tier is Skippable. So let's go ahead and go in. I'm also going to tell you when I finish these series, so if you want to hear me talk about at least the finale on one of my monthly wrap-ups, you can go find that video. So the first book series that I read this year was The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. Now, this is the first fantasy book series that I ever read, and it's a middle grade series, and I really enjoyed it. Even though it is a middle grade series, there is some kind of silliness involved, but overall I did quite enjoy the series, and I think it deserves a spot in the good to great category. So we'll start the tier list off there. In February, I finished a group of 6 novels that are connected by Dennis Lehane in the crime fiction category. And these are the Kenzie and Gennaro novels. And these are gritty works of crime fiction. Kenzie and Gennaro are these private investigators who work out of Boston. And although you can read them as individual standalones or out of order, they do work pretty well as a series, even though I unfortunately didn't read them in that order. I read them a bit out of order, but I did read the last one last, Moonlight Mile. But I think they are truly outstanding. It's some of the best works of crime fiction that I've read. All 6 of them are pretty solid. So our first entry into the truly outstanding category are those books by Dennis Lehane. In March, I finished the Tawny Man trilogy by Robin Hobb. If you've watched anything from me this year, you know that I've just loved Robin Hobb. She has quickly become one of my favorite authors. The Tawny Man trilogy is the 3rd series in the realm of the Elderlings, and it is truly S-tier material, some of the best fantasy I've read anywhere. After that, this was in April, I read the Earthsea books, the books of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. These are some very influential works of classic fantasy, and they're not younger fantasy like I thought they were going in. The storytelling is pretty dense, even though it's kind of straightforward stories, but this is a series that its estimation is raising in my mind. I think about these stories quite a bit, especially the 3 of the 6 that I really enjoyed. I think it's a truly outstanding series, and I think it's one that's neglected a little too much nowadays, but I think it is a great book series. Alright, 2 book series in May. The first were The Great Tales by J.R.R. Tolkien. The Great Tales, of course, are The Children of Hurin and The Fall of Gondolin and Beren and Luthien. And to recycle an old joke from the previous tier list of fantasy series I did early this year, they're great. I'm going to keep Prydain probably a little higher above The Great Tales. Some of it is quite dry. It is more historic in nature because Tolkien didn't really have these ready for publication. Christopher Tolkien put these out, but I think they're still great. I still enjoyed all 3 of those. And the next series is the Gwendy Button Box trilogy by Stephen King and Richard Chismar. And you know that King is my favorite author, and I love Stephen King, but unfortunately this trilogy goes into the skippable category. If there's anything that King's written that is skippable, I put Danse Macabre, his nonfiction kind of treatise on the horror genre or history of the horror genre, at the top of that list, but right underneath that, I think this Gwendy Button Box trilogy is very skippable. The first book has a good concept that I don't think they executed very well. The second book, Chismar wrote by himself. It's not very good. The last book, I thought there was a good theme in there that I really enjoyed, but overall, it's not a great series. It's very slight tales, very skippable. Unless you're a completionist for Stephen King, I think you don't need to pick up the Gwendy Button Box trilogy. Okay, in June I finished The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a series that I hear people talk about as some of the best they've seen, and then people DNF it, and I kind of understand both sides of it. I really liked aspects of it. I think thematically, Kuang is a very strong writer, especially for how young she is and having published 4 books already. But she's not a great character writer in my opinion, and that's, I think, one of the reasons a lot of people don't connect with it, and it's one reason I didn't connect with it. So I think Poppy War goes into the good to great category. There's a lot of good, some great, but nothing that's truly top tier, truly outstanding, best of the best material. In July, I finished 2 book series. The first by Robin Hobb, and this is the Rainwild Chronicles. This is a quartet or a tetralogy of 4 books. That is the 4th series in the realm of the Elderlings. And this is the series that most people say is kind of mid for Hobb, but mid for Hobb means it's good to great. In fact, I'm going to put it probably above the Great Tales. It's not as good as Tawny Man. It's not as good as any of the other series in the realm of the Elderlings, but it's still Hobb. There's still... The thing that I loved about the Rainwild Chronicles is the world building was truly fantastic in that book series. It was a bit slower at times and maybe not as compelling a read as the rest of the realm of the Elderlings, but it's important. Do not skip it. It's still very, very good. The other series that I finished that month was the Shattered Sea Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Now, this is kind of his forgotten trilogy. This is more... like a little less grim, a little more straightforward storytelling, a little more plot-based storytelling than character-based storytelling. And it's good. It's very good. I don't think it's great. I think it suffers much like Rainwild Chronicles in that it's being compared to the rest of everything else that Abercrombie wrote. So I'm going to put it here in the good, probably the good spectrum of the good to great. But I still enjoyed it. I still think back, especially the second book, I enjoyed quite a bit, and I think it's still very good. All right, on to August. I read the Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. This was fantastic. Some really great storytelling. Sequel trilogy to The First Law, but I really think you need to read all of the 9 novels. I think it suffers from not understanding some of the characters if you don't read the first 6 leading into this series, but I really loved it. I think Age of Madness is truly outstanding, and I'm going to put it at the top of that tier, at least for now. So that was a great book series by Abercrombie. I can't wait to see what he writes next. In September, I read the Galactic Empire novels by Isaac Asimov, and I quickly learned why these are kind of forgotten novels. These are early novels by Asimov. Even though they occupy the same multiverse as the robot novels and the Foundation series, they're really slight. The first book, I got to the end and I actually groaned out loud. The second book had a really great idea, but Asimov was really young. I think it was his second novel, and the execution just wasn't there. If I ever read these again, I will reread the third book, Pebble in the Sky. I did enjoy that one. So because of that, I'm not going to put it totally at skippable, but I think it's pretty mid, as they say. Those robot novels and Foundation novels are so much better in quality than the Empire novels. But I did enjoy the third one, Pebble in the Sky. Okay, and that takes us to October, where I read the conclusion of The Realm of the Elderlings, the Fits in the Fool trilogy by Robin Hobb, the 5th series of The Realm of the Elderlings, and right now The Realm of the Elderlings is 1 or 1A in my estimation as far as my favorite book series of all time. It's right up there with Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and Fits in the Fool trilogy for me is the best of all of it. Truly best of the best. The conclusion of Fitz Chivalry Farseer's journey in this 16-book series is completed, well, 9 with Fitz, and Robin Hobb just stuck the landing in this one, and it's truly fantastic. I closed out 3 book series in November as I was getting to the end of the year. The first was the Ender's Game series, the Ender Quartet or Quintet. Now listen, I call it the Quartet. I do not consider Ender in Exile a part of the Ender Quintet. I say the Ender Quintet does not exist, so this evaluation is for the Ender Quartet. I think the Ender Quintet belongs to the Shadow series, but that's a story for another video. Go check out that video, the video I already did on the Ender's Game reading advice, where I tell you what all that's about and have some graphics for you to understand it. But this is a really hard book series to classify, these 4 books, because Ender's Game, without a doubt, is best of the best in the genre. Speaker for the Dead, for me, truly outstanding. But then things get tricky. Xenocide, I absolutely hated the ending, and I would put that down as a C-tier book. And then Children of the Mind was my lowest rated book of the year out of 124 books. So what do? I guess I average all that out, and I put it good to great. I would say because of the strength of the first 2 books, we could probably put it kind of in the middle of this tier, good to great. But Xenocide and Children of the Mind are not books that I enjoyed much at all. Also in November, I finished the Ilium and Olympos duology by Dan Simmons, and this is one of the most ambitious works I've ever read. It's a retelling of the Iliad set on Mars, and it has humans and creatures called post-humans and sentient robots, and leans heavily in the works of Shakespeare and Proust. And it's a pretty interesting series. I liked a lot of it. A lot of it would be truly outstanding, but I think as a whole, it's kind of in the good to great category. But I'm going to put it more on the great end, because I think even though he didn't quite, I think, nail it, the ambition itself, you have to respect it. And there's a lot of it that I really did enjoy. So I do call it good to great when the day's over. All right, down to 2 left. The last one I finished in November was Mistborn Era 2 by Brandon Sanderson. This is another one of those series that's kind of uneven. I felt that The Alloy of Law, the first book, was probably my least favorite book of Brandon Sanderson's. But the books got better. By the time we got to the 3rd book, Bands of Mourning, I really enjoyed that one. And I thought he mostly stuck the landing. I wasn't a fan of the huge Cosmere implications at the end of the series, but I think it's definitely a B tier, good to great. Doesn't touch the first series very well, but I think I could put it probably maybe between the Great Tales and Poppy War. Okay, and the final book series I closed out this year was the Ender Shadow series. Now listen, this is another one that suffers from kind of an identity crisis. The first 4 books, truly outstanding, without a doubt. Ender Shadow itself is one of the best in the genre, but those 4 books are fantastic. But then he wrote 2 more books. He wrote Shadows in Flight and The Last Shadow, which are both, again, kind of down here. Shadows in Flight only has 1 character from the first 4 books of the Ender Shadow series. And then The Last Shadow, what it does is kind of wraps up the Ender's quintet or quartet with the characters from that last Ender Shadow book. So it's really hard to classify this one as well. I think I just got to put it in the good to great, because the first 4 are great. I don't think it needs to be in mid, even though the ending of the Last Shadow itself is the most lackluster ending to any book series I've read in my lifetime. But as a whole, there's still a lot of good in here. So maybe, that feels about right. More on the good side than the great side. But that's the 16-book series that I read this year. Hey, what did I get right? What did I get wrong? What are some of your best of the year? Did you have any true S-tier book series that you closed out in 2022? I would love to hear about it. Hey, I forgot to shoot an outro, so if you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.